Hello again, my little Guvasa, and welcome to another Viola Victory video. In today's episode, we shall be doing an after-action report. That's right, it's time for some more dispatches from the front lines. And oh boy, do I have a shameful, a disgraceful meatball for your viewing pleasure today. Because I took the most hated faction in all of Warhammer 40k to a tournament. That's right, the Tau Empire went to war. I guess it's true what the commissars say. You either die a hero of the Imperium, or you live long enough to see yourself become a Tau auxiliary. And so, without further ado, let's climb aboard our crisis suit and monka our way right into this. You there, guardsmen! Do you like multi-part plastic sci-fi infantry that doesn't cost a kidney? Well, good news! The Mordian Glory channel is now officially sponsored by Wargames Atlantic. Wargames Atlantic sells fantastic sci-fi models which are perfect as alternative Imperial Guardsmen. This includes the Bulldogs, totally not Praetorians, or the Legrognards, which are totally not Mordians, Vestorians, or Kriegers, all in one box. And the best bit is, Wargames Atlantic offers a bulk buy discount, and the more you buy, the bigger the discount. Perfect for amassing those huge platoons of guardsmen. So what are you waiting, you fool? Click on the affiliate link down below, get yourself some great models, and support the channel today. As is tradition, I want to start off by saying a few thank yous. Firstly, I want to say a big thank you to the tournament organisers and venue for this particular event, Just Play Games in Liverpool. Just Play is my friendly local gaming store, and they run regular RTTs every single month. And it's the quintessential local tournament experience. Lots of great friendly players and just some really fun games. Speaking of the players, I want to say a huge thank you to all of my opponents. 40k is very much a social game, and depending on who you're playing against and what they're like, it can really make or break the experience. And I am fortunate enough to say that I had 3 fantastic games against 3 brilliant people. So thank you to my opponents for making the day. I also want to begrudgingly thank a member of my community, Mad Larkin. You see, it is thanks to him that I am running Tau at this tournament in the first place. During one of my live streams, as I am wont to do, I put to chat, what should I take to my next tournament? We ran a few polls, we had a bit of back and forth, and then Mad Larkin came in, and with not 1, not 2, but 3 generous super chats, he browbeat me and he forced me to take Tau to this tournament. I'm only joking, by the way. Huge thank you to Mad Larkin for his generous support and giving me an opportunity to try and army out and do something a little bit different. But with all of that said, now let's get into the video proper, beginning with the list overview. As per usual, I have made a separate video going into the nitty-gritty, deep diving this Tau army list, and I'll make sure there's a link to that down in the description below for those of you that really want to get into the minutiae. But of course, I will give you a brief overview now. Starting off with a little bit of context. What was my goal with this army list? What was I trying to achieve? Well, it's actually pretty simple. I wanted to run a guardified Tau army. A lot of time when I see Tau army lists, it's just battle suits. And to be honest, it's something that I've seen for God knows how many editions at this point. And sure, I guess it works, but it's just a little bit boring. And so I wanted to run something that felt much more balanced, a bit more of a hybrid guard army, but with Tau units. So you'll see I've got a mixture of infantry, you'll see that I've got some damage dealers, you'll see that I've got some pseudo-indirect fire, you'll see that I've got my secondary game. I am essentially applying the 4 pillars of guard army list building to a Tau army list. Not only do I think it will make it a bit easier for me to pilot this army, being able to apply my guard brain, but I also think that it will make it a slightly more pleasant experience for my opponents. Tau have a really bad reputation, hence why I've sort of lent into the meme with this video of it being the most hated faction and all that good stuff. And well, there's kind of a meme to it, but there's a grain of truth to it as well. I've done a poll recently on my channel that got 3,000 votes, and I know Auspex Tactics did a poll recently on his channel where it got thousands of votes, and saying which was the army you just don't like playing against the most. And in both of those polls, with thousands of votes being taken into account, Tau came ahead by a country mile. And I think a big part of that is because Tau army lists typically come down and just blast you off the table in one turn, and it doesn't feel like there's much interaction there. So what I want to do with this army is not only guardify it for my own brain, but also I hope that it'll make it a little bit more fun for my opponents, where sure, I'm still trying to win all of my games, we're not trying to go 0-3 or anything here, but that there's a little bit of back and forth, that I'll be able to screen with some infantry, that'll give some stuff for my opponent to kill, we'll be able to get into a bit of firefight, but it's not overwhelming firepower. I'm just trying to do something a little bit different here, and hey, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, maybe all Tau players will laugh at me and my stupid monkey brain, but I want to see what would happen. So with that in mind, my list consisted of the infantry corps. Every day in the corps is like a day on the farm. Every meal a banquet, every paycheck a fortune, every formation a parade. I love the corps. Doesn't matter what army list I'm running, I'm taking a lot of infantry. And in this list, I took a total of 60 ground pounders, 40 fire warriors, good old-fashioned fire warriors, not breachers or anything like that, just 40 fire warriors with pulse rifles, with a guardian drone in each squad, and they were just there to give me some bodies. A couple of platoons of fire warriors. On top of this, I had 2 units of pathfinders, and I put those inside devilfishes. Why? Because I like scouting vehicles. These are like my Catachans and Chimeras. So I thought that might kind of work. Yes, I gave the recon drones. Yes, they could have infiltrated, but I wanted the scout and I wanted to do it on a budget. I know I could have put breaches in there and then put fire blades in there. But that would have been really, really expensive. I didn't want that. I wanted cheap scouting vehicles, and this was the way that I found to do it. That covers my infantry corps and my primary game, but then we get on to the damage dealers, and I had 2 hammerheads with rail cannons and burst cannons, and then I had 1 hammerhead with an ion cannon, and I had 1 riptide with a big ion cannon as well. I know prevailing wisdom is to go triple hammerhead with the rail cannons if you're going to go hammerheads, but I wanted a little bit of redundancy and a little bit of flexibility, because I know there's a lot of things like Rogal Dawns out there and Tyrann effects out there, and they could just blank damage. So having that bit of flexibility meant that I had the ability to sling rail cannon rounds into stuff, but if I came across something with a blank damage or just a chonky and vulnerable save, I had volume with the ion cannons to also provide that extra little bit of redundancy to my firepower. I wasn't just relying on one big pop shots. As for my pseudo indirect fire, obviously Tau don't get things like basilisks or anything like that, so I was relying on deep striking units to be able to get those angles, and I went for 2 units of crisis suits with the melters. I thought about going for the plasma ones, but I was like, if I'm only getting 2 shots per suit, I might as well get 2 really good shots, right? So I went for the melter ones, and one of those squads was being led by an enforcer commander who had all of the melter guns as well. As for my secondary game, I went for a ghost kill and 3 squads of 3 stealth suits, because not only are they great force multipliers, not only can they mess up opponents' scout moves with their infiltrating, but also they're cheap units that can come in and do secondaries. All of this was wrapped up inside a Montca detachment. That just about covers the list though. Let's head over to the lay of the land. So what was this event all about? What was the format? How competitive was it? What was the terrain like? Well, for the format, it was your classic 1-day, 3-round RTT. As for the terrain and the missions, these are predetermined by Just Play's in-house home-built terrain and mission pack. These are very similar to those of Games Workshop, so you'll notice the density of the terrain is similar to that if you're on a GW board, but it's done taking into account the terrain that Just Play has available at their venue. For those of you who are not familiar with sort of standard terrain layouts, essentially there are sort of 3 go-to ones that a lot of tournaments use. You've got GW or pseudo GW like Just Play uses. That tends to be a little bit lighter And then you've got UKTC and WTC terrain, which tends to be a lot more dense. Just Play essentially uses the sort of their own twist on GW style terrain, but they do use WTC scoring, so it comes down to that points differential. As for how competitive this event was, it was surprisingly sharky. There was a good number of players at the tournament. It was kind of the last proper competitive one before the end of the year, so I think a few people were coming down and getting some last reps in before Christmas. And yeah, it was quite sharky. We had some good players there, many of which had been to tournaments before at Just Play and elsewhere. We had a few local tournament winners, and we even had someone from Team England that was there as well. So it was actually pretty sharky, and overall I would say it was very, very competitive. But you know what? I think that's enough pre-game preamble, if you will. I know why you guys are all here. You want to know how I did. So without further ado, let's get into the games. Game number 1, and I find myself against Jack and his Sisters of Battle. Jack is actually someone who I have played against before and who has featured on these tournament after action reports in the past. Last time that we played, I had my unending swarm Tyranids versus Necrons, and the time before that, it was my guard versus his Votann. So it was a great way to start the tournament against a mate and familiar face. In his list, he had Morven Varl, an Immolator, another Immolator, 1, 2, 3 Castigators, 1 with the battle cannon, 2 with the auto cannons, and then we had a squad of Dominions. They were broken down into 2 5-man units, 5 with melters going in one of the Immolators, the other 5 with bolters sitting on the home objective. Then there was a couple of Exorcists, a unit of Paragon Warsuits for Varl, 3 squads of Seraphim, and then we had a big squad of Sisters Novitiate that were also broken down into 2 5-man squads, 5 going inside the other Immolator with the Flamers, and the other 5 with the Bolters just infiltrating forward as part of their deployment. The mission for round 1 was supply drop, the deployment was search and destroy, and the twist was adapt or die. For deployment, I infiltrated 2 units of stealth suits and my ghost kill up towards the top left-hand objective. In my sort of left/middle, I had a devilfish, my 3 hammerheads, and a platoon of fire warriors. And towards my right-hand flank, I had another platoon of fire warriors, my other devilfish, and my riptide. In reserve, I had my 2 crisis units, and I also had a unit of stealth suits. For the sisters, on the Tau left flank, they had a Exorcist, an Immolator with the Flame Novitiates inside, and a Castigator and a squad of Seraphim. And then towards the right flank / the middle, we had the rest of the armor, and then we also had those Initiates really sneaking forward on the right flank with a bit of infiltration. In reserve, the sisters put 2 squads of Seraphim and also Varl and her Paragon buddies. With everything on the table, it was time to find out who was going to get the first turn. We roll off, and Jack manages to win it, going first and seizing the initiative. Sisters turn 1 was actually pretty quick. Essentially, there were 2 armoured thrusts barreling into the Tau lines. Taking advantage of being Bringers of the Flame so they can move and advance with all that good stuff, over on the Tau right flank, an armoured column of a Castigator, an Exorcist, and another Castigator start coming forward. And they pour all of their firepower into my Devilfish, and they manage to destroy it. It actually explodes, taking 2 wounds off the Riptide and killing 2 Fire Warriors from each squad, and 3 of the Pathfinders die on the way out as well. So it was a pretty good kill from the sisters, lots of extra damage being done. As for the Tau left flank, an Immolator, a Castigator, and an Exorcist came forward over there, but due to the fact the Exorcist was having to fire indirectly and there just wasn't quite as much firepower available, they didn't quite manage to destroy the second Devilfish, bringing it down to about 7 wounds, I believe. With the sisters coming on in full force and some initial damage being done to the Tau, it was time for the Blueies to fight back, and, well, they decided to come at me hard, so I was like, God damn it, we're going to meet aggression with aggression. I'm going to really embrace the killing blow. Everything's advancing. Everything is going forward. One way or another, this game was going to be over in the first few turns. Over on the right flank, I push forward with my Riptide and my Fire Warriors, and I also get my Pathfinders that have come out of Delphish around the corner so that they can do some line of sight as well. I almost instinctively go with the Pathfinder and say, oh, they're going to guide the Riptide, but then I realized that actually I'd be better off using the 2 Fire Warrior units to guide the Riptide and the Pathfinders, because the Pathfinders have got rail rifles and I really want to kill that Castigator that's on the right hand flank because it's on an objective. So both Fire Warrior units guide, one for the Riptide, one for the Pathfinders, and that actually ended up being the right call, because the Riptide was able to bring the Castigator down to 3 wounds, and then a cheeky rail rifle shot that managed to get a 6 for a dev wound was able to punch through the front of the Castigator, do 3 wounds to it, and knock it out. As for the Fire Warriors themselves on that flank, they could all draw line of sight to the Novitiates, and they were able to pour plenty of pulse rifle fire onto them. And at the end of the day, even though I'm only hitting on 4s, there's a lot of shots there. They're only 1 wound. I'm wounding on 3s, and we were able to wipe out the 5-man infiltrating Novitiates. On the left flank, I go full bore with the 3 hammerheads and my devilfish. My pathfinders actually jump out of the devilfish so they can bring their rail rifles to bear, and we pour everything we can into the immolator and the castigator on that side. Now, this actually ended up being really tricky because the immolator popped smoke, and that actually made it kind of hard for me to be able to get my shots to connect. And then there was a few miracle dice knocking around that meant that it could, as and when needed, block my rail cannon shots from one of my hammerheads. It just ended up being a bit tricky bringing the immolator down. It was definitely tanking a lot of firepower. It just goes to show the power of that smokescreen stratagem. But eventually we were able to grind down the immolator, and it was actually a good testament to the iron cannon hammerhead because it wasn't relying on a 1 pop shot, and it was guided, so it had a few lethal hits, and it actually ended up doing the majority of the damage. With the immolator finally going down after taking a lot of firepower, the 5 novitiates popped out, but they did end up receiving a murderous burst of fire from a stealth suit team. And I got kind of lucky with my stealth suits, and I was able to kill 4 out of 5 of them. That was just me just getting lucky with a bunch of burst cannon fire. And I was only hitting on 4s, but I just managed to just spike my damage really hard there. Now, after the immolator and the novitiates were pretty much made combat ineffective, I still had 1 hammerhead left over, one with a rail cannon. I fired the rail cannon into the castigator, I got the hit, I got the wound, and more importantly, I wounded on a 6. That made it a dev wound. I rolled my damage, and I rolled the big fat 6, meaning that I was able to do 12 damage to the castigator, knocking it out in 1 go. That was a really big deal. I was on track to just getting the immolator and the castigator on that flank, considering how many assets I've got over there. Really gave me an advantage on that left-hand side. But the nuns with guns are by no means defeated, and their turn 2 sees them come in and deal some savage blows to my army. Over on the Tau right-hand flank, the Exorcist and the remaining Castigator power forward, and a unit of Seraphim deep strike down, and the 2 tanks using their big guns were able to destroy my Riptide. They actually destroyed it fairly easily. And then the Seraphim were able to burn away some of my Fire Warriors as well, bringing one of my squads down to just 4. Now all I've got on that right flank is a bunch of Tau infantry, and I'm facing down the better part of a sister's armored column. Over on the left hand side, it's actually my infantry which are taking a mauling. The Exorcist fires into the Pathfinders with all of its shots, trying to take advantage of the blast, trying to get rid of those guiding units, and I actually end up going down to just 3 Pathfinders left in that unit. We also have a immolator which comes forward and tries to go into my devilfish and gets a good hit, but the damage isn't quite there, and the devilfish does live, although it is very badly damaged at this point. Last but certainly not least, a unit of Seraphim dropped down into the middle, and they were able to burn away 4 of my fire warriors. So in total, my infantry squads are being badly mauled on the left, but my armor's just about holding on. And on the right, my armor's been completely mauled, but my infantry is just about holding on. But at this point, the sisters are nearly fully committed to the fight. The only thing they've got off the board is Mordianglorytv, and everything else is on the front lines and, more importantly, in line of sight. And so it's time for a turn 2 killing blow. On the left-hand side, I push forward with my armor once again, forming a spearhead of hammerheads, and I'm able to destroy not only the remaining immolator, but also I'm able to destroy the exorcist as well. My opponent Jack unfortunately didn't have any 6s available in his miracle dice pool at this point, and that meant that those hammerheads just went to town, basically each one taking out one of the enemy vehicles. That actually left the Iron Head and a bunch of fire warriors left over, and they were able to clear up the last of the novitiates that had been around since turn 1, and also pick up the Seraphim as well. As for the right-hand flank, my Pathfinders pressed an emergency beacon. That's just narrative, there's no ability or anything there. And I brought in both of my Sunforged battle suits. Deep striking down, they were able to destroy the Exorcist, and they really badly damaged the Castigator as well. But I did mess up, and I completely forgot my rules for being able to reroll the damage, and I rolled really badly. I rolled like a 2, a 1, and a 2, and I reckon if I re-rolled them, I might have been able to do a little bit more damage and maybe even got that Castigator if I'd remembered that rule. What I'm going to do, guys, at the end of the video is have a little section going over rules that I got wrong, because I did get a few wrong, but rest assured, nearly every single one of them was against me. But getting back to the battle, after the Tau turn 2, I definitely feel like the heart of the Sisters' army had been cut out. At this point, all they had left over on the left-hand flank was a unit of minions that had spilled out of an immolator and a unit of Seraphim. And what they had over on the right flank was a Castigator and Mordianglorytv. She came in as rapid ingress. Not a lot of Sisters left over, but they did go for one last big push. Sisters turn 3 on the left flank in a desperate attempt to do something to the brutal Tau armored spearhead. The 5 Dominions come forward and fire their melter guns into one of my hammerheads, but they were only able to get 2 wounds through, and thanks to having the benefit of cover, I was able to roll a 6, and I stopped one of those wounds. And the one melter gun that went through rolled a big fat 1 for the damage. I guess the Emperor was not guiding their shots that day. As for the right flank, well, Mordianglorytv came in and, well, she did what she does, clearing away the screens of fire warriors and then charging in with a long charge, but managing to get it with a miracle dice into my unit of battlesuits led by my commander. And even though it was an enforced commander, they still chopped through every single one of them without much effort. But sadly, for the bolter bitches, that was the last hurrah. Over the course of turn 3, nearly every single Sisters unit was destroyed. The remaining Seraphim that had been jumping out from behind the ruins and jumping back on the left flank were annihilated by an aggressive push from a Devilfish and a Stealth Suit team, and then Castigator and any other remaining scraps of infantry were picked up over on the right flank as well. In fact, by the end of turn 3, all the Sisters had left was Varl and 5 Dominions sat on their home objective. At that point, Jack and I just worked through the last couple of turns fairly quickly, and when the dust had settled and all of the pulse rifles had stopped pulsing and the bolters had stopped booming, the final result of the game was 82 to the Tau and 28 to the Sisters. Not gonna lie, it was a strong start for the Tau, but Jack and I both had a lot of fun in the game, and one of the things that we chatted about afterwards was it felt like the Tau just outnumbered the sisters at every single point. I think that's partly because, of course, I'd built my army in kind of a gardified way, and there was definitely some quantity there as quality, but I also think that is a bit of a testament to just, I think they've made sisters far too over elite. Like, I was trading unit for unit with the sisters, and by the end of the game, I still had half my army left, and they had almost none, if not none, of their army left over whatsoever. It's difficult to be that elite when you're T3 with a bit of power armor. But with that said, now let's continue on and get into game number 2. So after a quick lunch consisting of a deli sandwich, a sausage roll, and an iron brew, it was time to get into game number 2. And this time I was going to be facing off against Eddie and his Space Marines. And what's really cool is I've actually played Eddie before. Last time we met, he was just getting into the hobby and he had a few Space Marine models and a few games under his belt. But he has come such a long way since then, and he had a really interesting Space Marine Vanguard list. In his army, there was a captain in Gravis armor with the enhancement, the Blade Driven Deep. There was also a lieutenant in Phobos armor with the Ghost Weave Cloak, and a lieutenant with combi weapon with the Shadow War Veteran. There was also a big squad of 5 heavy intercessors and another squad of 5 regular intercessors. I say a big squad of 5, they looked like there was more in there because they're such big chunky models. We also had a Ballistus Dreadnought, a Centurion Devastator squad. This was a big squad. There were 6 of them, all armed with the Twin Las Cannons and the Centurion missile launchers. There was an Inceptor squad, another Inceptor squad, this time 6 strong, but all of them had the big all of them had the assault bolters. And then we had an infiltrator squad, an Invicta tactical warsuit, a Land Raider Redeemer, and a Storm Speeder Thunderstrike. The mission for round 2 was Scorched Earth. We were playing on Crucible of Battle deployment, and the twist was Stalwarts, and I can confidently tell you that both Eddie and I completely forgot about Stalwarts being a thing. For my deployment, on my right flank, I had a Devilfish with some Pathfinders in it. In the center, I had a big concentration of forces, all 3 Hammerheads and a platoon of Fire Warriors. I wasn't quite sure where Eddie was going to go, and so I wanted to make sure that I had something that could push into the center, support the right, or support the left, wherever it was needed. On the left flank, I also had a good concentration of forces with another platoon of Fire Warriors, another Devilfish with Pathfinders in it, and I also had my Riptide. For infiltration, I had a unit of stealth suits towards the middle, but still hiding behind cover, and I had a unit of stealth suits over on the left flank as well, and my Ghost Kill was on the left as well. Like last time, I put my Crisis suits and my final squad of stealth suits in reserve, and for the Space Marines, they put the Centurions in reserve and all of the jumpy dudes, and on the board, they had the Storm Speeder on the Tau right flank, they had the Heavy Intercessors infiltrate forward in the middle with the Captain, and there was also a couple of Lieutenants around there as well. And on their home objective and towards the Tau left flank, there was the Ballistus, the Redeemer, a unit of Infiltrators, a unit of Intercessors, and the Invicta Warsuit. We roll off for first turn, and Skinwalker Mordian is in effect because for once, I got the first turn. But due to my opponent's cagey deployment, and also the fact that I didn't want those heavy intercessors just to come out and start messing me up if I went too aggressive, I didn't have a huge amount to do in my first turn. On the right flank, I scout moved and then moved my Devilfish onto the objective down there, just locking that down. And then on the left, I moved and advanced forward with lots of stuff, and I was able to draw a line of sight onto the Invicta Warsuit with the Riptide, the Ghost Kill, and with my Devilfish. I also got the Pathfinders out of the Devilfish so that they could guide the Riptide and the Ghost Kill onto the Invicta Warsuit. And thankfully, for once, my firepower didn't just go cold on me at a critical moment, and I was able to destroy the Invicta with plenty of firepower to spare. But that was about it. It was the only target I could really go after, and everything else was hidden. We go over to Space Marine turn 1, and the cage off begins. My opponent essentially decides to come out with almost nothing, the bare minimum that he needs to achieve his objectives. So a lieutenant comes out into the middle to get extend battle lines, and there's a little bit of shuffling and truffling around, but that's about it. My opponent does not want to come out against that Tau firepower, and he's just waiting for an opportunity to bring his reserves in so he can hit me all at once. This actually really worries me because I've gone first, and if my opponent plays it cagey for the first 2 or 3 turns, it means that I'm not going to get much Monka going at all. So it comes back over to Tau turn 2 very quickly, and I think to myself, you know what? I've got to play it a little cagey myself because I don't want to overexpose myself to my opponent's reinforcements, but I do need to start putting some pressure on. I am currently sat on 2 of the objectives, but let's go on all 3 of the primaries in the middle and see if that can prompt a response. So over on the left, I secure that objective with a Riptide, a unit of Pathfinders, and a Devilfish. I also actually put one of my strike teams inside the Devilfish as well in case it gets destroyed, so they can always pile out onto the objective. Also on the left, I take my Ghost Kill and a unit of Stealth Suits and I push them really far forward. And the reason I do this is because I'm not too bothered if they die. I know they're like annoyingly difficult to get rid of, especially the Ghost Kill with like its blank damage drones. And also my opponent has a lieutenant that's trying to recover some assets. And if I can snipe that with the Ghost Kill, that would be really, really good. I also bring out another stealth team and I go after another lieutenant, the one that jumped onto the middle objective just to get some extend battle lines. So I've got 2 stealth teams and a Ghost Kill pushing my opponent. And then I'm on all 3 of the primary objectives, and I've got my firepower nicely staged so that if my opponent doesn't do anything about it, I've got these objectives locked down. And if my opponent does do something about it, he is going to have to eat some damn good Tau firepower. It comes over to Space Marine turn 2. And this is where I believe Eddie makes a bit of a mistake. And we did have a good chat about this afterwards. He says, I think I need to throw the kitchen sink at you. He's like, I can see your Riptide, I can see your Devilfish, I can see your Ghost Kill, I can see your Stealth Suits. If I can take all of those out, then I'll be in a really good position. So he brings on a lot of reserves. He comes forward with his intercessors, heavy intercessors that have been hiding behind the ruin there, and he goes for a big blow. But the problem is he doesn't go all in. He doesn't bring down the jumpy dudes as well. And I don't know if it would have made a huge difference, but I feel like if you're going to go all in, you should go all in. If you're going to do a hammer blow, if you're going to do a killing blow, the Monka, then you really need to be doing it whole hog. So what ends up happening is the Centurions come in and fire everything at my Riptide, but between a CP reroll to save for cheeky invulnerable save and the fact that I also do -1 damage on it, it does actually end up surviving on 4 wounds. He then manages to clear away one of the stealth teams, and he brings the Ghost Kill down to 2 wounds, but doesn't quite kill it. The Ghost Kill basically tanks all of the damage from the Land Raider Redeemer. You'd think the Redeemer would be good against it because of the damage too, but it's only strength 6 and it doesn't roll great on the number of shots. And when the multi-melter stuff try and come in and finish it off, I'm able to blank the damage from it from using my 2 once per game blank damage drones. Once the Space Marines have finished throwing everything they've got at me, my army is badly damaged, but very few units have actually been killed. In fact, sure, the Riptide's damaged and the Ghost Kill's damaged, and one of my stealth teams has been wiped out and another one's taken some casualties, but that was it. It was a big go from the Space Marines, but it wasn't a big blow. The reason I think this was the case is because the targets that I had made available. Riptides are tough. They're 2-up with a 4-up. They're tough. Ghost Kills are annoyingly durable, and so are stealth teams. They're annoyingly durable with all the -1 to hits being thrown around. I think that my opponent's firepower didn't do as much as he wanted because of the targets that I had made available. If they'd been like Devilfishes and Hammerheads he'd go after, he probably would have done a lot more. But those really weren't available for him to go after. We then get into Tau turn 3, And thank God I still have one turn of Monka left. This, I think, is another big mistake that my opponent made. If he had just waited until after turn 3, because I had gone first before he did his big push, not only would he have gone all in with everything at the same time, but he would have been able to limit my clapback as well, because I wouldn't have had my lethals available to me. But I did have my lethals, and I made sure that I used them. Bringing in my crisis suits and my stealth team to support my crisis suits, I brought them into the middle so that they could go after the heavy intercessors that were there. And after many fusion guns had been fired, there were no heavy intercessors left, and the captain was dead as well. Pretty much all of my remaining firepower goes into the Centurions, but they are tough beasties, and 3 of them do end up surviving. Although I do manage to get a cheeky few shots onto the Land Raider Redeemer as well, and I'm able to take half the wounds off that. So my clapback hasn't been monumental. I haven't blown my opponent off the table, but it's important to note that the Space Marines have got a lot less assets than me. We're going 1 for 1 on units, but I've got a lot more units than them. Again, this sort of guard principle of just having quantity and quality is really paying off in these matchups. Eddie's turn 3 comes around, and he brings in all of his remaining units. A small unit of Inceptors, the jumpy dudes, the heavy bolters, drop into the middle of the board. And then we also have the big squad drop in next to my Riptide. They do manage to kill the Riptide, and they do some other scattered damage as well, but there's just not as much firepower left in this Marine army as there should be. And I have to say, I think my opponent rolled a little bit cold this turn 3, which is really not what he needed. When you're already behind the curve, having a cold turn at a critical juncture like this really does not help. Like, to give you an idea, he put a full Land Raider Redeemer into my unit of crisis suits led by my Enforcer Commander, and he only killed 1 and left another one on 1 wound. I would have expected a Land Raider Redeemer to just burn its way through that unit, but it just couldn't quite manage it. And going into Tau turn 4, we finally managed to get to grips with the Space Marines. We finally managed to bring our firepower to bear, and we finally deliver the killing blow. Took a little bit longer than expected, but once we could get onto our opponents, we were able to do the damage that Tower is so famous for. All of the jumpy dudes bar 1 were wiped out. In fact, one of the squads was brought down through sheer volume of pulse rifle fire when 3 units of fire warriors and a unit of pathfinders all just fly everything into them. And then I am able to kill the Land Raider Redeemer with my hammerheads, and I'm also able to kill most but not all of the Centurions. I think there's 1 left with my iron cannon and also some other spare firepower that I had rocking around. After Tile turn 4, the only things Marines had left were 1 Centurion, 1 Ballistus Dreadnought, 1 Storm Speeder, and 2 5-man squads of Marines. And they were facing off against all of my hammerheads, and yeah, a lot of my army was still intact. Marine turn 4 was still impressive though. They were finally able to finish off the Riptide, and they were able to beat up one of my stealth suit units in combat. There was a bit of a fight going over on the far left hand flank between the stealth teams and a unit of infiltrators, but that was about it. And over turn 5, both sides just scrabble around, get the last few points they can, pick up the last few units they can, and then we get to the end of the game, and it has been another Tau victory. But this one was by no means a big victory. In fact, the score was 75 to the Tau and 57 to the Space Marines. So a very respectable score indeed. And I think that is a testament to how far Eddie has come along as a player. Last time we played, it was a bit of a one-sided slaughterfest. But this time, he kept it really close. And I think if he had just waited till turn 3, he would have been able to outlast my Monka, and he would have been able to deliver a killing blow back at me. And when we had a chat about this afterwards, he was like, well, I didn't want you to sit on the primary for like most of the game. And I said, well, I only scored primary turn 2, turn 3 if you'd let me have them. And then you could have taken them back and had them turn 4, turn 5. And so actually you could have made it equals pequals on primary, and then it would have come down to secondaries. And for secondaries, I only scored 35 and Eddie scored 32. So there was not much in it in terms of secondaries at all. So it does go to show that sometimes, even though it can feel wrong, play it cagey, play the long game, go for the final turn wins, and it can be done. And sometimes it's absolutely the thing you should be doing. But hey, if you lost the game because of one single mistake, then that shows that it was a really close and really fun game, and it could have gone either way. And that's a learning experience. And I always say, I say this about myself, I say this to you guys, you learn more from your defeats. And I know that Eddie's going to learn from this. And I tell you what, I bet next time I face him, third time's the charm, I reckon he'll get me. So with 2 victories under my blue belt, it was time to go into game number 3. And I was facing off against another Jack, and this time he had Tyranids. And for the 3rd time in this report, Jack is actually a familiar face to Mordian Glory viewers. I think we play into each other most times that I go to tournaments at Just Play. You would normally know him as Chaos Jack, because most time that we face, he's either been using his World Eaters or his Death Guard, but today he was running his Tyranids. In Jack's army, there was a Broodlord with the perfectly adapted enhancement, a Hive Tyrant with the adaptive biology enhancement, and a Neurotyrant. There was also 2 units of Gargoyles and a unit of Hormagaunts, all 10 strong. There was a Biovore, 2 Exocrines, and a big squad of 10 Gene Stealers, a couple of Lictors and a Neurolictor, and then we had a Maliceptor, 3 Raveners, and 2 Tyrannofexes. Tyrannofexes were, of course, armed with the big cock cannons. Mission for round 3 was Burden of Trust, and that was on sweeping engagement deployment with the twist of raised banners. Speaking of deployment, I put both Devilfishes with Pathfinders down on the left flank, and I backed them up with both of my Rail Cannon Hammerheads. We were going for a big left hook. On my home objective, I put 2 units of 10 Fire Warriors, a cheeky platoon, and then in my center, I had another platoon of Fire Warriors and my Ion Cannons. Over on my far right flank, I had the Ghost Kill and a unit of Stealth Suits, and I had another unit of Stealth Suits that infiltrated a little bit forward on the center left. As for the Tyranids, on the Tau left flank, they had a unit of Raveners. In the center, they had an Exocrine, a Tyrannofex, a Maliceptor, and a Neurotyrant, and they also had a unit of Gargoyles, and they had the Hormagaunts. Big central stack of death. Over on the Tau right flank, they had a unit of Gene Stealers with the Broodlord, another Exocrine, and there was also another Tyrannofex as well. In reserve were a couple of Lictors and a unit of Gargoyles. Now, just before the game started, Jack and I both agreed that we were going to be playing this speedy. You see, we know each other quite well, we're good mates, and every time we play, we always end up chatting loads, and then we get to like turn 3, it's like, oh god, we've run out of time. So this time, we were like, nope, we are going to make sure we play fast. And you know what? Big props to Jack for pointing that out and setting the tone for the game, because it's exactly the right thing to do. In fact, we've been saying we should be putting ourselves on a chess clock. We didn't have one available, but we had a gentleman's agreement of no thinking, all gas, no brakes. With that in mind, we rolled off to see who was going to get first turn, and Skinwalker Mordian was in command, and I got the first turn. With the mission briefing of go fast as fuck boy in my mind, I went for a very aggressive turn 1. I was like, you know what? This game's going to be over turn 3 one way or another. I took both of my scouty Devilfishes, I scouted them forward, and then I moved and advanced them forward as far as I could go on that left flank. The idea being I wanted to jump out a unit of Pathfinders so that they could target the Raveners that were hiding behind the wall, because who needs breaches when you've got Assault Shock Troop Pathfinders? The other unit of Pathfinders also pushed forward and jumped out onto the objective, and they could draw line of sight onto a unit of Hormagaunts. Supporting them, I sent forward a stealth team that could also draw line of sight onto the Hormagaunts. I brought the railheads up behind this initial advance, but not too far forward because I didn't want them to get cock cannoned. And then I sprinted a unit of fire warriors from 1st platoon from my home objective. I got a big 6 on the advance, and they were able to actually get into the now vacated Devilfish because the Pathfinders had jumped out onto the objective. Did this because if the Devilfish died, I still wanted to have plenty of bodies that could jump out onto the objective. The only other movement in tile turn 1 was to take a unit of 10 fire warriors from the 2nd platoon in the middle and push them out onto the objective. I did this simply because I had secure no man's land. Tile turn 1 firepower goes in and it starts off strong. My Devilfish guides the Pathfinders onto the Raveners. I roll my shots with the rail rifles first. I roll 666. Which means that all the Raveners die because the Pathfinders are guided, so they get lethal hits. The rail rifles have got enough AP to punch straight through the Raveners' armor, and they're 3 wounds each. Again, I say, who needs breaches? To be fair, my shooting does cool off for the rest of the turn, and it actually takes a Devilfish, a stealth team, and a unit of Pathfinders, which have been guided by the stealth team, to wipe out a single 10-man squad of Hormagaunts. But we got there in the end. You might think it's kind of crazy me pushing forward with this amount of stuff to go after a couple of chaff units, but how I saw it was, I'm playing fast, I'm playing aggressive. If we're going to go Montca, let's go bloody Montca. But also, I was looking at my opponent's army and thinking, there aren't that many swarmy units here, and if I can take out those cheap smaller squads, it means that it's going to make it harder for my opponent to do actions and to score points. So I was willing to take casualties if it meant that I could remove my opponent's objective play, because I figured at the end of the day, and this list has kind of proven it in a couple of games now, I tend to have more assets than my opponent, so I can be a little bit ballsier. But I guess only time will tell if my balls paid off. Tyranid turn 1. Over on the left flank, the Malin sector comes forward and has fire support from the Tyrannofex and the Hive Tyrant and one of the Exocrines. The Tyrannofex on the right flank also starts coming forward, and the Gene Stealers barrel forward as far as they can do, sneaking onto the far right objective. Those guys are really fast when they want to be. A unit of Gargoyles also flapped out onto the middle objective, ready to try and take on my Fire Warriors. Speaking of the middle, we'll start there first in terms of Tyranid shooting. Exocrine fired into the Fire Warriors, but they're annoyingly drawable. They had cover from the forest and they've got the Guardian drone, and so I only lost 6 out of 10 of them. If that was a Guardsman squad, they would have all been absolutely butchered. But I tell you what, boys, these Fire Warriors are really good. I think a lot of people are overlooking them. They're damn durable and they're damn cost effective. The Gargoyles also fired into them, but literally did no damage. And then the Gargoyles charged into the Fire Warriors and did no damage, but rather predictably, the Fire Warriors also did no damage back to the Gargoyles. But still, I didn't lose a full squad of Fire Warriors in the middle, despite the best efforts of an Exocrine and a squad of Gargoyles. But really, the main action was over on the left flank. The Tyrannofex fires into my Devilfish and destroys it with ease. Then the Hive Tyrant and the Maliceptor and some other firepower go into my stealth team and also my Pathfinders, but I kind of weather it. I lose 1 of the stealth guys and I lose 8 out of 10 Pathfinders. It's not great. I don't really like using Pathfinders because they have proven to be quite good, but it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And by the end of Battle Round 1, I've lost about a dozen infantry, a Devilfish, and a stealth suit, and the Tyranids have lost a unit of Hormagaunts and a unit of Raveners. That's pretty equals pequals, and I can trade like that. Tile turn 2 sees the push continue, but this time we're going to be doing it across all fronts. Over on the right hand side, I boost forward with a unit of infiltrating stealth suits, and I also bring my Riptide over and I can draw a line of sight to the ass of the Broodlord. I put all of my firepower into the Broodlord and his Gene Stealer unit, and I kill them down to just 1 Gene Stealer and the Broodlord itself. Because it was the Broodlord on the objective, my opponent couldn't take him off first to restrict my line of sight, and that really allowed me to hammer them with a lot of firepower. In the center, my remaining 4 Fire Warriors fell back from the flappy Gargoyles, and then I got a unit of fire warriors on top of a ruin so I could do some plunging fire, and then I guided that unit of fire warriors with a third unit of fire warriors. You see, having so many fire warriors can actually be quite good. And that one unit of fire warriors hitting on 3s, lethal hits, plunging fire, ignoring cover, just completely burned through all of those gargoyles. Rapid fire pulse rifles proving that they are still great at killing chaff. But once again, the big show was on the left flank. I poured nearly everything I could into the Malon Scepter. Iron Cannon Hammerhead, I had rail rifles, I had grenades, I had rail cannons, accelerator burst cannons, everything went to that goddamn Malon Scepter, and it just would not die. It was because I had a 4+ invulnerable save combined with a 5+ feel no pain from a stratagem. And it came down to my last Hammerhead. And I was looking at that Malon Scepter and I was thinking, it's going to live. If I shoot it, it's going to live. I know what happens in 40k. If you get tunnel vision on units, they just keep on rolling good. It's just fate. So it always happens. Every player here watching this video will tell you about a time when if they just switched targets and not been so focused, it would have made a big difference. And so I remembered, look, don't do the sunk cost fallacy. I remembered, look, switch targets if you have to. And I took my last rail cannon hammerhead, my last unit that I could have shot on that flank, and I put it into an exocrine instead. I got a hit with the main gun, and then I got a 6 to wound with the main gun, dev wounds. I then rolled a big 6 on the number of damage, taking 12 wounds off an exocrine. I still had my 2 Seeker missiles. I fired both. I got 2 hits, 2 wounds. My opponent passed one of his armor saves. He'd already used a CP reroll on the Malon Scepter earlier in the turn, and the Seeker Missile went through and did enough damage to kill the exocrine. And suddenly, that left flank was completely turned around. Because if I hadn't killed the exocrine, all I would have had to show for that turn was a wounded Malon Scepter. But now, I've got a dead exocrine and a very badly injured Malon Scepter, and that completely changes that flank. However, the exocrine did blow up. It didn't do very many mortal wounds at all, and it only took 1 off the Hive Tyrant, and that actually ended up being a good thing for Jack, because it meant his Hive Tyrant went from having a 5+ feel no pain to a 4+ feel no pain. That's just how the enhancement works. Going into the bug turn 2, and the Tyranids are starting to feel the pressure of the Monka, but they have a chance to clap back, and they grab it with all 4 hands. On the right flank, the surviving Broodlord and his Genestealer buddy jump out onto the stealth suits, kill them all, and they use a stratagem to jump back behind the wall. The Tyrannofex over there fires the Cock Cannon into the Riptide, but between a combination of -1 damage and also a CP reroll, the Riptide manages to survive on 7 wounds. Not much happens in the center, just a unit of gargoyles come down, and after shooting they get to move onto the objective, denying me the primary points there. On the left flank, the big flank, Tyranids manage to deny me all of the primary. You see the Malon Scepter goes in and kills the remaining 2 Pathfinders, and then charges my second Devilfish over there, which I'd brought onto the objective, and it's got 4 OC, and I stupidly only have 4 OC on the objective as well. A silly fallback with my stealth suits the earlier turn meant that I didn't hold that objective. If I just had 1 more guy towing on, I would have kept it, but I didn't. And so the Tyranids have successfully denied me all primary points in their turn 2. They do also manage to pick up one of the Hammerheads using the Tyrannofex on the left flank. Battle round 3 begins, and the Tau have got 1 last turn of Monka, and we need to make it count. On the right flank, we come forward with the Ghost Kill, another stealth team, and the Riptide. We get rid of the Broodlord and the remaining Genestealer, and the right hand objective is now securely in Tau hands. In the middle, there's a sense of deja vu as the Fire Warriors reload and pour another volley of pulse rifle fire into the second unit of gargoyles, wiping them out and securing the middle objective for the Tau. But the game truly hangs in the balance on the left flank. I take my remaining unit of Pathfinders and I move and advance them forward, creating a screen. I support that screen with a unit of stealth suits, the ones that had been somewhat mauled earlier in the game. I bring forward a unit of Fire Warriors onto the objective, along with the Devilfish, which falls back from the Malinceptor, and then I bring my guns to bear. I actually had rapid ingressed a unit of Crisis Suits in the Tyranid turn 2, and they were led by the commander, and they come forward and burn the Malinceptor to ash. There is naught but motes of dust floating on the wind. I also deep struck another unit of Crisis Suits down on that flank, but just kept them in a nice safe position in case of any possible Tyranid counterattacks. With the Malinceptor down, there's just the Tyrannofex and the Hive Tyrant. And I decide that Hive Tyrant has to go. The first thing that I do is fire my Ion Cannon Hammerhead from the center into the Hive Tyrant. Now he's got a 4+ save, and he's also got a 4+ Feel No Pain. I'm not really expecting the Ion Cannon to achieve much. I just want him to fire some Tracer Fire, as it were. Unfortunately for Jack, he fails every single save. I'm not saying he fails some saves. I'm saying he fails every 4 invulnerable save and every Feel No Pain. And after the Iron Head is done, the Hive Tyrant's got like 1 wound left or something insane. I then fire my Rail Cannon guy at it, and I don't even get a dev wound, but even the CP reroll, Jack fails the 4 invulnerable save from the Rail Cannon, and the Hive Tyrant just dies. That should not have been that easy. Clearly, the greater good was smiling down on me. And to be honest, with that Hive Tyrant down, left flank is secure, and the Tyranids, they're not going to get back into this game. That's not to say they don't give it a good go. And in Tyranid turn 3, they do remove the second Rail Cannon Hammerhead with that Tyrannofex on the left flank, and they also manage to kill the Riptide with the other Tyrannofex on the right flank. But that's about all they wrote. And over the course of turn 4 and turn 5, the Tau just have too much objective control. They have too many assets that they can just pour onto the objectives, screen out, just stopping the Tyranids from getting the points that they want. And so it ends turn 5 with plenty of time to spare. Jack and I completed our goal of having a quick game. And it is a third Tau victory. This one was really close though. Jack had done a great job of keeping me off the primary, and he still really limited what I could get right to the very end. And so the final score ended up only being 68 to the Tau and 58 to the Tyranids. So it was a good game. It was a close game. It was a really fun game. And I did not table the Tyranids at all. In fact, I never managed to bring down those Tyrannofexes. And they were the last 2 Tyranid units standing on the board, surrounded by various Tau battle suits and Fire Warriors. As I like to do with all of my opponents, after the game, Jack and I had a good chat. And we both had a bit of a laugh because we agreed that if he hadn't said to me at the beginning of the game, let's go balls to the wall, all gas, no brakes, I probably wouldn't have been as aggressive. And I would have probably been a bit more cautious. And if I'd been cautious, it might have meant that the Tyranids would have actually won the game, because they could have got those really tough bugs onto the objectives early on, and I probably would have struggled to shift them. But I actually want to say a big thank you to Jack, because he encouraged me to play the Monka how it's meant to be played. And I actually felt like this was the game where I played the army the best. There was less caginess, there was less caution, there was just pure killing blow. But with game 3 over, we get to the end of the tournament, and somehow I've managed to go 3-0, and I have placed 2nd overall. The list that came first was actually 120 World Eater Jackals, and that list looks absolutely bloody insane. Every single one of them has got like a 5+ invulnerable save and a 5+ Feel No Pain. I definitely want to try that out in the future with my Blood Pact. But getting back to the Tau, Throughout this after action report, I've been dropping in a few like lessons learned from each games. So I'm not going to repeat myself with those here, but what I will do is go over a few of the rules that I got wrong. I think it's important to highlight this because A, it'll allow me to get better in the future, and B, hopefully it will allow any other prospective Tau players or people that are thinking of picking up the faction to avoid the pitfalls that I fell into. So the first thing that I got wrong is I completely forgot my ability to reroll the damage from my Sunforged battlesuits. I don't think I ever did that throughout the tournament. I knew it was a thing, and I even checked it after that first game, but I just kept forgetting it. So make sure that if you're running the melter battlesuits, that if you get a bad damage, because it is a bit swingy on the D6, that you remember you've got that reroll against monsters and vehicles. Speaking of missing abilities, I never used the Tau Fire Warrior ability either. I got to the end of the tournament and realized that I hadn't even looked it up or checked it out. And it turns out it is really good. If you shoot an enemy infantry unit with Fire Warriors, that infantry unit is then -1 to hit. That would have been a really good tool to have in the toolbox, especially in that game too, where I might not have been able to do much damage with my Fire Warriors, but I could have made those Vanguard Marines -1 to hit. On top of this, I never fired my Riptide's missile drones once. I know it has missile drones, and before the tournament, I even said to myself, don't forget the missile drones, but I literally never fired them. And it does actually make a big difference, because without them, the Riptide doesn't have a huge volume of fire, and so make sure you're not forgetting those drones, because it's an extra few strength 7 shots. But the one that I think punished me the most, the mistake that I made, which I think held one of my units back severely, was I completely messed up how guiding worked with hammerheads. I just presumed that the hammerhead would hit on 3 when guided. I knew it had +1 to hit from Armor Hunt or Tank Hunt, whatever it's called, its ability, but I just didn't even register that that would stack up, because 1 is +1 to hit and 1 is +1 ballistic skill. It's kind of like with Guard and Kriegers, how 1 is +1 to hit with the Grim Demeanor, and 1 is +1 ballistic skill with the Take Aim Order. So the entire time I was firing my hammerheads on 3s, when most of the time they should have actually been hitting on 2s. If I had known that, I probably would have done a much better job of pairing hammerheads with stealth teams, because stealth teams give you reroll 1s. But in the interest of full disclosure and full transparency, not every rule that I got wrong went against me. I did get some things wrong, and they were in my favor. Firstly, the Fire Warrior's DS turret. I did not realize that you had to stay still to be able to use that turret. So I was getting a couple of extra strength 5 shots out of my Fire Warrior squads. I just read the stat line. I saw that it was an extra couple of strength 5 shots, like hitting on 5+, and I didn't realize that it had like an ability attached to it as well. Like I said, I didn't look at any of the Fire Warriors abilities. I was just looking at the weapons that they had. So hold my hands up there, guys. I shouldn't have been firing that DS turret most of the time. I also made a big foul up with one of my stealth suit teams. Every single turn, I kept one of my stealth suit units in reserve because I thought it could deep strike. It turns out they can't. Whenever I've faced against stealth suits in the past in previous editions, I swear to God they could deep strike, but maybe my memory's playing tricks on me. Maybe I'm just misremembering, but it turns out in 10th edition, you can't deep strike stealth suits. Now, I am very fortunate that the gods of fate smiled on me and it did not actually impact any of my games. And I can say that hand on heart. I've gone back through the photos and I've gone back through my memory and I've worked out what I did with those stealth teams at each game. I'm going to take you through what I did with them, and hopefully you can agree with me that I dodged a bullet. Game 1, I brought them in my opponent's deployment zone turn 3, and it was within 6 inches of the board edge because I was deploying just away from the Dominions on the home objective and also from the sisters' armored forces that were over towards that right hand side from the tile perspective. So I can tell you right now, when you look at the pictures, you'll see they came in basically on the board edge, so they might as well have just walked on from reserve. So dodged it there. Game 2, I did bring them too far on. They came down with my crisis suits near my deployment zone. But if anything, it actually punished me because I just threw them down because I didn't know where to put them. I just put them with my crisis suits and I just used them to guide. But if I had just walked them on the board, they still could have seen the target that they ended up guiding for the crisis suits. And if anything, by putting them out, I actually exposed them, and I can say that their firepower was not even used because the crisis suits picked up those heavy intercessors without needing any extra burst cannon fire from the stealth suit. And game 3 against the Tyranids, I literally brought them in behind the ruin on the right hand side where another stealth team was and where the ghost keel was, and that was within 6 inches of the board edge. So a bit like in game 1, I technically deep struck them in, but actually I didn't. I could have just walked them on. So fortunately, as you can see, it did not impact any of my games, but that is a big mess up from me, and that absolutely could have impacted the game. I'm just very lucky that it didn't. But regardless of whether it made a difference or not, it was still a big foul up from me. So please lambast me, and I want to assure you all that I'll make sure I don't make that mistake again in the future. But with that said, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Did you enjoy this after action report? What do you think about the Gardified Tau list? And how would you adapt and change this list to make it even better? Of course, outside of getting the rules 100% right. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.